My stepchildren said, "We only listen to our biological parents," so I cancelled everything. It happened during Christmas dinner, right in front of my entire family, when Ethan, 19, stood up and delivered those words with a sneer, while his sister, Maddie, 17, applauded. My wife, Sarah, just sat there, silently staring at her plate. She didn't defend me. I simply stood up, took my jacket, and walked out of the house, a house I had been paying the mortgage on for the last 5 years. What they didn't know was that, right there, that same night, from my cell phone, I was going to meticulously cancel every supplementary credit card, every bank account access, every utility service, and every luxury I had been funding since I married their mother. My name is Daniel Miller, but everyone calls me Dan. I'm 44, and I work as a civil engineer for a major construction firm. I make good money, very good money. In fact, for the past 5 years, I've been the sole financial backbone for a family that never once considered me one of them. Sarah, my 40-year-old wife, has 2 kids from her previous marriage to Jeremy, a failed musician who ditched his family when the kids were little. He barely sends $300 in child support when he remembers to do it. I met Sarah at an architecture conference 6 years ago. She was working as an administrative assistant in a small studio. I was completely captivated by her smile, her apparent vulnerability, and the way she spoke about her children with such deep love. She told me how hard it had been raising them alone, how Jeremy had abandoned them when Ethan was 11 and Maddie was 9, how she worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, dreaming of giving them a better life, but that money was always tight. I was recently divorced, with no kids of my own. I had dedicated my life to my career, and at 43, I felt utterly alone. The idea of starting a family, of being the hero who rescued this woman and her children, filled me with a sense of purpose. How naive I was. We started dating. The first few months were wonderful. Sarah was attentive, affectionate, and made me feel important. When I finally met Ethan and Maddie 4 months into the relationship, they were polite but reserved. Sarah assured me they just needed time to adjust, that they had suffered a lot with their father's abandonment, and that I needed to be patient. I was patient, perhaps too patient. A year into the relationship, Sarah and I got married in an intimate ceremony. She insisted the kids weren't ready for a big wedding, so we should keep it simple. I agreed, as I always seem to do. We moved into a bigger house in a nice suburban neighborhood, a property I bought entirely in my name. Sarah suggested several times that I put both our names on the deed in case something happened to me, but my gut instinct told me to keep the house solely in my name. Thank God I listened to that instinct. From the start, I covered every expense for our blended family. The mortgage, utilities, groceries, clothes, the kids' private school tuition, their extracurricular activities, brand new iPhones, laptops, and nights out with friends. Sarah quit her job 6 months after we got married, claiming she wanted to dedicate herself to the family and be more present for the kids. In reality, she spent her days at the gym, lunching with friends, and binge-watching TV series. My stepchildren never called me by my name. I was him or mom's husband, or they simply ignored me, directing all their requests straight to Sarah, who then relayed their demands as if she were my personal secretary. Ethan needs money to go out with his friends. Maddie wants a new dress for the party. The kids need you to drive them to the mall. I tried my best to win their affection. I took them to baseball games, paid for their music lessons, and attended their school events, even though they'd pretend not to see me in the audience. Ethan was studying engineering at a private university, costing a hefty $4,000 a month, nearly $50,000 a year. Maddie was in her final year of private high school with plans to attend an expensive fashion design college next year. I paid for everything without complaint, hoping that one day they would see me as something more than an ATM. Their biological father, Jeremy, Jem, would show up sporadically. He'd arrive empty-handed, without a dime to contribute, but full of promises and cheap gifts. The kids adored him. Whenever he showed up, I became invisible. Sarah allowed Jeremy into my house. He'd sit in my living room, eating my food. He's the father of my children, she'd say. They need that connection. 3 months ago, Jeremy resurfaced after almost a year-long absence. He drove up in a borrowed car with a new girlfriend on his arm. The stepchildren ran to greet him like he was a war hero. They spent the whole weekend with him, returning Sunday night raving about Dad and how cool he was. They didn't even acknowledge me when they walked in. That night, Sarah and I had our first serious argument. I told her I felt used, that her kids treated me with contempt, and that she allowed it. She cried. She accused me of being insensitive, of not understanding how difficult it was for her kids to accept another father figure. She managed to make me feel guilty for voicing my discomfort. I ended up apologizing, as always. 2 weeks later, Ethan asked me to buy him a car. He didn't ask with respect or gratitude, he simply assumed I would do it. All my friends have cars, he said. I should have one too. When I told him a car was a big responsibility and we needed to discuss it as a family, he went straight to Sarah. She came to me that night with her usual emotional manipulation strategy. He's a good kid, Dan. He just wants to be like everyone else. Can't you do this for him? For me. I bought him a well-maintained used Honda Civic for $8,000. Ethan didn't even say thank you. He looked the car over, made a face of disappointment, and said, I thought it would be newer. Sarah looked at me, expecting me to apologize for not buying something better. Maddie was no better. For her 17th birthday, 2 months ago, she demanded a lavish party at a rented event space with a DJ, a professional photographer, and themed decor. The budget Sarah presented me was $8,000. When I suggested something more modest, Maddie threw a tantrum worthy of a 5-year-old. She cried, she yelled that I hated her, that I was ruining her life. Sarah begged me to give in. Just this once. I conceded, as always. The party was spectacular. 80 teenagers showed up. There was an open soda bar, a dessert table worthy of a magazine, and professional lighting. Jeremy showed up halfway through the party without contributing a single dollar. Ethan introduced him to all his friends as my dad. He didn't introduce me to anyone. I spent the entire night standing by the wall like a ghost, having paid for a party where I was the only unwanted guest. A month ago, Sarah informed me we should host Christmas dinner at our house. She was inviting her mother, her sisters, and their families. She also wanted to invite Jeremy. The kids asked, she explained. It'll be the first Christmas in years where both of their fathers are present. It means a lot to them. I absolutely refused. I told her Jeremy was not welcome in my house. If they wanted to see him that badly, they could do it another time, another place, but not in my own home during the holidays. Sarah accused me of being selfish, of trying to separate her from her children, of not understanding the dynamics of a blended family. Her sisters called me, her mother, Evelyn, called me, everyone pleading with me to be reasonable and think about the children. I finally gave in, with one condition. Jeremy could only stay for 2 hours. Sarah agreed. Christmas night arrived. I spent over $3,000 on food, decorations, and gifts. We had turkey, ham, 12 different sides, expensive wines, and elaborate desserts. The gifts for Ethan and Maddie were generous. A new laptop for Ethan, an iPad Pro for Maddie, designer clothes for both, plus cash. Jeremy arrived on time for the first time in his life. He brought gift bags for the kids, cheap trinkets bought last minute at a discount store. The stepchildren greeted him with effusive hugs. They completely ignored me when I came in from the kitchen, where I'd been coordinating the final dinner details. The dinner was tense. Jeremy monopolized the conversation, recounting anecdotes from when the kids were little, stories where he and Sarah were the happy protagonists. The stepchildren laughed. Sarah smiled nostalgically. Her family listened politely. I was a stranger at my own table. After dinner, while everyone was in the living room opening presents, I went to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Maddie walked in and, without even looking at me, said, "I need you to Venmo me $500. I'm going on a trip with my friends next week." It wasn't a question, it was an order. I told her we'd talk later, that it was Christmas, and we should be with the family. She scoffed and walked out, muttering something about me being cheap. I returned to the living room with the coffee just as Jeremy was handing out his gifts. Ethan opened his, a cheap band t-shirt. Maddie received a piece of costume jewelry. Both acted as if they'd been handed pure gold. "Thanks, Dad." "It's perfect," they said in unison, hugging him. Then they opened my gifts. Ethan barely glanced at the laptop. "I already had one," he lied shamelessly. Maddie put the iPad aside without even turning it on. Neither of them thanked me. Sarah's mother, Evelyn, a 68-year-old woman who never accepted me, decided that moment was the perfect time to make a comment. "It's so nice Jeremy could be here. The children need him. The presence of the biological father is irreplaceable." She looked directly at me as she said the last part. Sarah said nothing. Her sisters nodded. Jeremy smiled smugly. Something inside me began to snap. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ethan, emboldened perhaps by his biological father's presence, or just tired of pretending to be polite, stood up with a glass of cider in his hand. "I want to make a toast," he announced. Everyone went silent. "To Dad, who has always been there for us." He looked directly at Jeremy. "And I want everyone to know that Maddie and I have decided on something important." He paused dramatically. "We only listen to our biological parents. Mom and Dad are our family. Everyone else in this house is just circumstantial." The silence was absolute. All eyes turned to me. Maddie stood next to her brother, smiling maliciously. "Exactly. We didn't ask for him to be here. He's not our dad, and he never will be. So, from now on, we'll only take orders from Mom and Dad." Sarah paled but remained silent. Jeremy smiled awkwardly but was clearly pleased. Sarah's family looked down or away, avoiding my eyes. Evelyn nodded slightly, as if approving the declaration. I stood there motionless for a few seconds that felt like forever. Then, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I stood up, folded my napkin, and placed it on the table. I looked Ethan directly in the eyes. "Understood," I said. Simply that. I went to the coat rack. I took my jacket and my keys. "Where are you going?" Sarah finally asked, finding her voice, though it was weak and shaky. "Out," I replied. "To handle some circumstantial matters." I walked out of my own house, closing the door softly behind me. I got into my car and drove to a coffee shop that was open on Christmas night. I ordered a black coffee and pulled out my cell phone. For the next 2 hours, I meticulously canceled everything. First, the supplementary credit cards I had given to Sarah, Ethan, and Maddie. I called the bank and shut them all down. 3 cards with $10,000 limits each that they used freely, canceled. Next, I transferred all the money from our joint checking and savings accounts into my personal account. These were accounts where I deposited my entire paycheck every month. $42,000 transferred in a matter of minutes. I canceled the corporate card I had given Sarah for household expenses. I canceled the streaming subscriptions they all used, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon Prime. I canceled Sarah's gym membership, which cost $200 a month. I canceled the insurance on Ethan's car, which was in my name. I called Ethan's private university and requested that the charge for the upcoming semester not be processed to my account. I called Maddie's private high school and did the same. Both institutions confirmed that without the corresponding payment, the students would not be able to remain enrolled. I sent an email to my attorney, Michael Johnson, Mike, asking him to meet as soon as possible after the holidays. I needed to discuss divorce options and asset protection. Finally, I wrote a text message to Sarah. The circumstances have changed. We'll talk tomorrow. I sent it and turned off my cell phone. That night, I slept in a hotel for the first time in 5 years. I slept deeply. I woke up feeling strangely free. The next day, December 26th, I returned to the house at 10 a.m. Sarah was in the living room, still in her pajamas, her eyes swollen from crying. Ethan and Maddie were nowhere in sight. Jeremy wasn't there either. "Where were you?" was the first thing Sarah asked, her voice broken, but still with an accusatory tone. "At a hotel," I replied calmly, thinking clearly for the first time in years. "Dan, the kids weren't serious last night," she began with her usual minimization strategy. "They were excited to have their father here. They said something impulsive. You know how teenagers are." I sat down across from her, maintaining physical distance. "Sarah, Ethan is 19. Maddie is 17. They're not toddlers who say thoughtless nonsense. They said exactly what they think, what they've always thought. And you allowed it. You stood by silently while they humiliated me in my own house. On Christmas, in front of your family." She started to cry. "I'm sorry, Dan. I should have said something, but I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. You know Jeremy has always been a complicated presence in their lives." "I don't care," I said with a firmness that surprised her. "What I care about is that after 5 years of supporting this family, paying every bill, every luxury, every whim, I was publicly declared circumstantial. And you didn't defend me. Not a single word." Sarah wiped her tears. "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to talk to them?" "I'll talk to them. I'll explain that what they did was wrong." "No," I replied. "I don't want anything from you anymore. Last night, I made some decisions. I canceled all the supplementary credit cards. I transferred the money from our joint accounts to my personal account. I canceled the subscriptions, the gym, and the insurance on Ethan's car. I notified the university and the high school that I will no longer be paying their tuition." Sarah stared at me with growing disbelief. "What? Are you crazy? You can't do that. Ethan is halfway through the semester. Maddie has to graduate this year. They can ask their biological father for help," I said. "The one they respect and obey so much. Jeremy doesn't have money, you know that perfectly well." Sarah yelled, standing up. "He can barely pay his own rent. How is he supposed to pay for college?" "That is not my problem," I replied with the same icy calm. "I am only circumstantial in this family, remember? Circumstantial people don't have permanent obligations." At that moment, Ethan walked downstairs in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He had his cell phone in his hand and a look of confusion on his face. "Mom, my card isn't working. I tried to pay for the breakfast I ordered, and it was declined." "I canceled it," I said, looking directly at him. Ethan stared at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because Eve decided that only biological parents are responsible for their children," I explained. "You said it last night. You only listen to your biological parents. Perfect. Then only they should support you." Ethan's face shifted from confusion to anger. "That's ridiculous. What I said last night was just to make it clear that we respect our dad. And I am making it clear that I respect your decision," I countered. "You believe Jeremy is your father? Excellent. Let him pay for your college, your car, your phone, your food, your roof. This is my roof, too. Ethan shouted. I live here. This house is in my name, I said with a calm that clearly unnerved him. Solely in my name. Your mother isn't a co-owner, so technically, all of you live in my house because Eve allowed it. Sarah quickly intervened. Dan, stop it. You're taking this too far. Ethan, go back to your room. Let me talk to him. No, I said firmly. Ethan stays, and call Maddie down too. I want everyone to hear this once and for all. Ethan didn't move. Sarah went upstairs herself to get Maddie. Minutes later, both stepchildren were sitting on the couch, looking at me with a mixture of resentment and growing worry. Yesterday, I began, you two publicly declared that you only listen to your biological parents, that I am circumstantial in your lives. Fine, I accept that classification. As a circumstantial person, I have decided to withdraw all financial support that I have been providing for 5 years. Maddie interrupted me with her shrill voice. You can't do that. Mom is your wife. You have responsibilities. My responsibilities are to my wife, not to my adult stepchildren who hold me in contempt, I replied. Sarah is an adult, and she can work. In fact, she worked before we married. She can do so again. This is revenge. Ethan accused. You're punishing us for something we said when we were angry. It's not revenge, I explained with exaggerated patience. It is simply accepting the terms you established. You want only your biological parents to have authority over you? Perfect. Then, only your biological parents should support you financially. It's logical, isn't it? The silence that followed was eloquent. Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling. Dan, please, we can fix this. The kids will apologize, won't you, kids? Ethan and Maddie looked at each other. Neither spoke. They're waiting for me to cave, I observed. Just like I always have. They expect that after this drama, everything will go back to normal, that I'll keep paying for everything while you all continue treating me like a stranger in my own house. Isn't that right? No, Sarah protested weakly. No. I challenged her. When was the last time Ethan or Maddie included me in their lives? When was the last time they invited me to something? When was the last time they asked how my day was? When was the last time they simply said thank you for anything? The silence was my answer. Exactly, I continued. I have been nothing more than a provider, an ATM with legs, and frankly, I'm tired of that role. Maddie started to cry. You're cruel. I never thought you could be so cruel. See, Mom. That's why I could never accept him. I always knew he was a bad person. Interesting, I responded, unfazed. When I was paying for your 17th birthday party, your designer clothes, your outings with friends, I wasn't cruel. I'm only cruel when I stopped giving you money. Sarah tried to hug me, but I stepped away. Dan, honey, please, I understand you're hurt. You have every right to be angry, but this will affect the kid's future. Ethan won't be able to finish his degree. Maddie won't be able to graduate high school with her friends. They can ask Jeremy for help, I suggested again. Or they can get jobs, or they can apply for scholarships, or they can do what millions of young people do when they don't have rich parents paying for everything. Jeremy doesn't have money. Ethan finally yelled, showing his true panic. How do you expect him to support us? That is your problem, not mine, I replied, shrugging. You chose to listen only to him. Now accept the consequences of that choice. Sarah switched tactics. She dropped to her knees in front of me, a completely theatrical move. Please, Dan, this is a marriage. We are a blended family. You knew from the start I had kids. You accepted that responsibility when you married me. I accepted the responsibility of being a husband, I corrected her. I tried to be a positive father figure, but they constantly rejected me, and last night, they made it perfectly clear they don't want or need my presence in their lives, except as a source of cash. So I'm giving them exactly what they asked for. No authority over them, and no financial responsibility toward them. I stood up to leave. Sarah grabbed my arm. Where are you going now? To work, I replied. Some of us have real jobs and real responsibilities. But it's December 26th. She exclaimed. No one works today. I have a project to supervise, I lied. Besides, I'd rather be anywhere but here. I walked out of the house, ignoring Sarah's screams and the stepchildren's protests. I drove aimlessly for a while, finally stopping at a quiet park. That's when the reality of the situation fully hit me. I had spent 5 years of my life trying to earn the love of a family that never wanted me. I had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on people who saw me as a resource, not a human being. I had allowed them to treat me with contempt because I was afraid of being alone again. But the truth was, I was already alone. I always had been in that family. My cell phone rang incessantly. Sarah was calling over and over. Text messages from Ethan. We need to talk like adults. Messages from Maddie. Please don't do this. I'm so sorry. They all sounded desperate, but none of them sounded sincere. What they really meant was, please go back to giving us money. I ignored all the messages and calls. Instead, I called my lawyer, Mike Johnson. Dan, Mike answered, surprised. Everything okay? It's a holiday. I need to see you as soon as possible, I said. Tomorrow, if possible. I want to start the divorce process, and I need to protect all my assets. There was a pause. Are you sure? You seemed happy the last time we talked. I was blind, I replied. Now I see clearly. Can you help me? Of course. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Prepare a list of all your assets and any relevant documentation. And Dan, I'm sorry. I know this must be difficult. The difficult part was living in that situation for 5 years, I said. This is liberation. That night, I went back to the hotel, ordered room service, watched a movie, and enjoyed the silence. No one asked me for money. No one ignored me. No one made me feel invisible. It was just me, my thoughts, and the peace that had been absent for too long. The next morning, I woke up to 63 messages from Sarah. Most were desperate pleas mixed with accusations of cruelty. The last message was different. Jeremy came over last night. I talked to him about helping with the kids' expenses. He said he can't, that he can barely afford to support himself. The kids are devastated. Please, Dan, just talk. I smiled bitterly. There it was. The truth they had all avoided admitting. Jeremy was the wonderful biological father, except in everything that truly mattered. I was the circumstantial one who paid the bills. I didn't reply. Instead, I got ready for my meeting with Mike. It was time to end this the right way and protect what was mine. Mike's office was downtown, in a modern glass and steel skyscraper. I arrived promptly at 9 a.m. with a binder full of documents. The house deed, bank statements, receipts for 5 years of payments, even screenshots of conversations where Sarah and the stepchildren constantly asked me for money. Mike, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a keen eye, meticulously reviewed everything for almost 2 hours. Occasionally, had let out a low whistle or shake his head in disbelief. Dan, he finally said, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. In my 25 years of legal practice, I've seen a lot of financial abuse cases, but this is extraordinary. You've spent over $400,000 on this family in 5 years. The number, spoken out loud, hit me like a punch. Money I could have invested, saved, used to travel the world, or simply put away for my retirement. Instead, I spent it on stepchildren who despised me and a wife who enabled that contempt. Can I recover any of it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mike shook his head. Not legally. Everything was given voluntarily. There was no technical coercion or fraud. But there is good news. The house is entirely in your name. There are no significant marital assets because Sarah didn't work for almost the entire marriage. The cars are in your name, and the investment accounts are in your name. She has very little legal claim to your wealth. What about alimony? I asked, dreading the answer. That could be an issue, Mike admitted. You've been married for 5 years. She quit her job during the marriage, supposedly to focus on the home. A judge might order temporary spousal support, perhaps 2 or 3 years, but considering you have no children together and she's capable of working, it won't be much. I estimate between $1,000 and $2,000 a month, tops. It was less than I feared. And the stepchildren? Do I have any legal obligation to them? Absolutely none, Mike replied firmly. You didn't adopt them. They are not minors depending on you. Ethan is 19, and Maddie is 17, almost 18. Legally, you owe them nothing. Zero. Zilch. A huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Then let's proceed with the divorce as quickly as possible. Mike nodded. I'll prepare the papers today. Sarah will be served in 48 hours. But Dan, I warn you, this is going to get ugly. When people realize the money is gone, they bring out the worst in themselves. Let them try, I said with a determination that even surprised me. I have nothing left to lose except the money I have left. And am going to protect that at all costs. I left Mike's office feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. I knew the consequences were just beginning, and I was right. That afternoon, while working in my actual office, overseeing construction blueprints, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, but I answered. Dan. It was the voice of Evelyn, Sarah's mother. Her tone was pure ice. We need to talk about what you are doing to my daughter and my grandchildren. I have nothing to discuss with you, Evelyn, I replied, politely but firmly. This is a matter between Sarah and me. You are a despicable man, she spat. Sarah gave you the best years of her life. She opened her home and her family to you, and this is how you repay her, leaving her with nothing. Sarah gave me nothing but bills to pay, I retorted, feeling the anger rise in my chest. And I am not leaving her with nothing. She has arms and legs, she can work like any responsible adult. She has 2 children to support. Evelyn shouted. 2 children who have a biological father, I countered. Jeremy. Why don't you call him to complain? Oh, right, because he's never contributed anything. But when I stop paying, I'm the villain. Evelyn slammed the phone down in a fury. 10 minutes later, I received texts from Sarah's sisters, both accusing me of abandoning a needy blended family, being cruel to the stepchildren, and breaking Sarah's heart. I blocked all their numbers. The next day, I returned to the house to pick up more of my belongings. Sarah was sitting in the living room, eyes red and swollen. She was wearing a dress I knew I liked. She had applied makeup carefully. She was trying to seduce me back into the situation. Dan, she said in a soft, vulnerable voice. Please, sit down. Let's talk like civilized adults. I sat down, but kept my distance. Let's talk. I know things got out of hand on Christmas, she began, putting on her best repentant victim performance. The kids were excited to see their father, and they said hurtful things, but they didn't mean it. They're willing to formally apologize to you. I don't want their apologies, I said simply. They don't mean anything to me anymore. Sarah blinked, clearly not expecting that response. How can you say that? They're just kids, Dan. They make mistakes. They are young adults, I corrected her. And their mistakes have been consistent for 5 years. This wasn't a holiday slip-up. They apologized to me last night, Sarah continued, attempting to gain some ground. They told me they regretted it. Did they apologize because they genuinely regret the way they've treated me for 5 years, or because their credit cards were declined this morning? I challenged. She looked down. It doesn't matter. We're a family. You made a commitment when you married me. You accepted them as your children. I accepted being a husband and a positive stepfather, I corrected. But for 5 years, I was only seen as the bank. You allowed the constant contempt and abuse. You stood by while your mother and your son humiliated me on a holiday. You chose silence over defending your husband. That was your choice. You stood with them against me. Now you're living with the consequences of that choice. This isn't about choice. She yelled, the vulnerability fading. It's about money. You're doing this because you're angry about money. It's about respect, Sarah. The money is just the leverage, I countered. I would have happily paid for your children's future if they had shown a shred of gratitude or respect. I would have been happy to be their stepfather. But you enabled them to treat me like dirt. They told me I was circumstantial. I'm simply accepting that classification, and circumstantial people don't pay $500,000 for people who treat them like an object. She started crying again. I didn't know how to handle it. You're such a good provider, Dan. I thought that was enough. I thought if I just let them have their way, they would eventually come around. I was wrong, I know that. But please, don't take away Ethan's future. He's so close to finishing his degree. He can apply for a student loan, I suggested. He can get a part-time job. He's 19 years old. He's an adult. He can learn what responsibility is. You've shielded him from it for too long. We need to talk about the house, she whispered, trying to change the subject again. I have nowhere to go. The house is protected, I told her. I kept the deed in my name, and my lawyer is filing for divorce. I'm leaving your name on the utilities for now, but you should start looking for a job and a place to live. You can stay here temporarily, but eventually, you'll sell the house. I can't live here anymore, and you can't afford the mortgage. She tried one last theatrical move. She ran to the front door and stood in the doorway, blocking my path. You're not leaving. Not until we resolve this. Ethan and Maddie appeared at the top of the stairs, watching the confrontation. I'm leaving, Sarah. Step out of the way, I ordered. No, I won't. You're abandoning your family. I'm leaving the people who rejected me. You are not my family, I stated simply. And you know why I know that? Because if I were family, you would have defended me that night. You didn't. But you need us. Maddie cried out from the stairs, her voice laced with panic. You can't do this. You're taking everything from us. How are we going to live now? You need a reality check, I replied, looking up at both of them. You need to realize that the world doesn't owe you an expensive lifestyle, private tuition, and free cars just because your biological father is a deadbeat. You need to learn what it means to work for something. Sarah was still blocking the door. We won't move. I took out my cell phone. Fine. If you won't move, they'll call the police and have you removed from my property for trespassing. This house is mine. You are residents here only because I allow it, and that can change at any minute. The threat was enough. Sarah stepped aside, defeated. Ethan and Maddie backed into the hallway, Maddie crying hysterically. I walked past them, carrying my packed bags. Sarah appeared in the doorway of the living room. "When will you be back?" she asked, a pathetic glimmer of hope in her voice. I replied. "You can stay in the house for now, but eventually, I will sell it, or you'll have to leave." "This isn't fair," Ethan shouted. "It's not fair to throw us out." "Life isn't fair, kid," I said. "But you just got a master class in the value of an honest relationship versus the value of a credit card. You treated me like a convenience. Now you are inconvenient. You always knew we didn't care about you. We only cared about your money." Ethan admitted, tears of rage and panic streaming down his face. "You were just paying our way." "You're right," I conceded, surprising him. "I don't care anymore. And you know what? It feels liberating to finally admit it. I spent 5 years trying to earn a place in your hearts, ignoring every sign that it would never happen. Now I finally accept reality. You don't want me. I don't want you anymore. We're even." I walked to my car with my luggage. Behind me, I could hear the screaming and sobbing of the family I had just abandoned. Part of me felt guilty, but a larger, stronger part felt utterly free. That night, in my hotel room, I got a text message from an unknown number. It was Jeremy, the biological father. "Heard what's going down. Just want you to know I always thought you were an idiot paying for my kids, but now I see you finally grew a spine. Good on ya, mate." I deleted the message. I wasn't doing this for Jeremy's approval. I was doing this for Dan Miller. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Mike, who had the divorce petition ready. Sarah was served that afternoon. The harassment began almost immediately. Sarah called my office, speaking to my boss, Mr. Reynolds, and crying, saying I was abandoning my family and ruining the children's lives. Mr. Reynolds, a decent man, called me into his office. "Dan, I got a call from your wife. Look, your personal life is your personal life, but I can't have your domestic issues interfering with this job. We have a major hospital construction project, and I need you focused. Handle this cleanly, or it will affect your position here." "Understood completely," I replied. "I'll talk to my lawyer. This won't happen again." I left Mr. Reynolds' office, humiliated and furious. Sarah had crossed an unacceptable line. I immediately called Mike. "We need a restraining order," I told him. "Sarah is contacting my employer, harassing me with constant calls. This is getting out of hand. Document everything," Mike ordered. "Every call, every message, every contact with third parties. Well, build a solid case for emotional distress and harassment." That night, the harassment escalated to a new level. I was having dinner alone at a quiet steakhouse when Ethan showed up. He sat down across from me uninvited, looking drawn and desperate. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "We have nothing to talk about," I replied, continuing with my meal. "My university unenrolled me," he blurted out. "They couldn't process the tuition for the semester. I lost all my classes. Now I have to wait until next year to re-enroll, and that's only if I can come up with the money." "That's your problem, not mine," I said without looking at him. "You're a selfish jerk." He exploded, slamming his fist on the table. "All this because you got offended by something we said when we were drunk." "You weren't drunk," I corrected him with icy calm. "You were perfectly sober and said exactly what you thought. Now you're living with the consequences." "Mom had to get a job as a cashier," Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "She's making minimum wage. Maddie had to transfer to public school because we can't afford the private one. We're barely keeping the lights on. Are you happy now? You're painting a picture of devastation, Ethan, but let me paint a different picture, I said, finally looking at him. Your mother is working for the first time in 5 years, something millions of responsible adults do every day. Maddie is in a public school, the same kind of school most American children attend. You're having to deal with a minor setback in your college education, a setback that millions of ambitious students overcome by working and applying for aid. None of this is a disaster. It's called reality. It's your fault. No, it's yours. And your sister's. And your mother's, I stated. You rejected me as family, but you accepted my wallet. I simply withdrew the wallet. You declared I was circumstantial. I am acting accordingly. Did you think you could have it both ways? He slumped, the anger draining away, replaced by genuine despair. Just pay for my tuition, Dan. Just my tuition. I'll pay you back when I graduate and get a job. I promise. Your promises mean nothing to me, I replied, standing up. And yes, Maddie did something, she applauded when you humiliated me. As for your mother, if she truly loved me, she would have defended me that night. She didn't. Now get away from me, or I'll call security. Ethan remained seated, openly sobbing in the middle of the steakhouse. I walked out without looking back. 2 days later, it was Maddie who showed up. She was more calculated than her brother. She waited for me outside my office, dressed in deliberately youthful clothes, hair in pigtails, no makeup. She was trying to look like a vulnerable little girl instead of the manipulative teenager she was. Dan, she said quietly. Please don't make me lose my friends. My school dance is coming up, and I don't have a dress. I can't go to the public school. All my friends are going to the private school. I'll do anything. I'll call you Dad again. You don't call me Dad, Maddie. You call me circumstantial, I corrected her gently. And you don't call me Dad because you want to. You call me that because you want to manipulate me into opening my wallet. I'm not that fool anymore. Mom is depressed. Doesn't that matter to you at all? I stopped and turned to her. Sarah. For 5 years, I cared. I cared so much that I spent $400,000 trying to make your family happy, and in return, I received contempt, humiliation, and emotional abuse. So no, I don't care anymore. You all made your choice, now live with it. You're cruel. She sobbed. You're just cruel. Keep telling yourself that if it makes you feel better, I responded. But the truth is, you were old enough to know exactly what you were doing. And your mother, who raised you, is just as culpable as you are. I left her crying on the steps and walked toward my future. The next few months were about rebuilding. I sold the house for an excellent price. My equity portion was $230,000, which I immediately invested wisely. I received a promotion at work, becoming a principal engineer with a significant salary increase. I started hanging out with friends again, something I had stopped doing during my marriage because Sarah always needed something. One night, 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was having dinner at a quiet steakhouse with a group of colleagues when I saw Sarah. She was working as a waitress, in a black uniform and a white apron. She looked exhausted, thinner, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. We made brief eye contact. She went pale and quickly turned away, disappearing into the kitchen. One of my colleagues, Sandra, noticed the exchange. Do you know her? She was my wife, I replied simply. Sandra nodded in understanding. She had heard versions of my story. It must be hard for her to work like that after years of not doing so. Probably, I agreed. But it's what millions of people do every day. Work to live. There's no shame in it, only in not taking responsibility. A month later, I got a text message from Ethan. I'm sorry. Not about the money, Dan. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I was a selfish brat. I'm working 2 jobs and took out a student loan to pay for school. I'm starting to understand what you meant about responsibility. I hope you're doing well. I thought about it. Finally, I wrote back. I'm glad to hear you are taking responsibility for your life. I wish you the best. It wasn't a reconciliation. I didn't forgive the years of mistreatment, but it was an acknowledgement that he was trying to change. That was all I could offer. Maddie never contacted me. According to mutual acquaintances, she had gotten a job at a clothing store and was saving up for community college. Apparently, she blamed everyone for her situation but herself. Typical. Jeremy completely disappeared. Rumor had it he moved to another city with his new girlfriend, running away from any responsibility toward his children. Ethan and Maddie finally saw their biological father for what he was. An egoistic coward who was never up to the task. 6 months after the divorce, I met Andrea. She was an architect, independent, childless, with her own established life. We met at a professional conference. The attraction was immediate, but we built the relationship slowly, with honesty. From the start, I told her my whole story with Sarah and the stepchildren. I expected her to run. Instead, she took my hand and said, "Thank you for sharing that. Now I know you're someone who values mutual respect. That's important to me, too." Andrea didn't need me to rescue her. She didn't have kids who needed to be supported. There was no family drama or absent biological fathers causing chaos. It was just her, brilliant and independent, choosing me because she valued me as a person, not as a provider. A year after the divorce, I was having dinner with Andrea at our favorite restaurant when Sarah appeared again, this time not as a waitress, but as a customer. She was with a man. She walked over to our table, looking nervous. "Dan," she said softly. "Can I speak to you for a moment?" "Sure, Sarah." She looked at Andrea, then back at me. "I just wanted to say that I'm so deeply sorry. You were right about everything. I used you as a provider, didn't value you as a person, and I deserved every consequence I received." I stayed silent, surprised by the sincerity. "That man," she continued, pointing toward her companion, "is Martin. He works in construction as a supervisor. He makes a modest salary. He can't give me the lifestyle you did, but he respects me, and I respect him. We are building something based on equality, not financial convenience." "I'm happy to hear that," I said honestly. "Ethan is back in college," Sarah added. "He took 2 jobs and got scholarships. He's proud to be paying for it himself. He says he never valued education when you were paying, but now that it costs him his own sweat, every class means something." "That's good," I commented. "Real growth requires real effort." Sarah hesitated. Maddie is still resentful, but she's working, paying for her own things, slowly learning that the world doesn't owe her anything. "She'll eventually learn," I said. "Or she won't. That's her path." Sarah nodded. "I just wanted you to know I'm deeply sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it. Have a beautiful life, Dan. You deserve it." She walked away before I could reply. She returned to her table with Martin, who greeted her with a warm smile. Andrea took my hand across the table. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine," I replied honestly. For the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. 3 years after that fateful Christmas dinner, my life was unrecognizable. Andrea and I got married in an intimate ceremony surrounded by people who genuinely loved us both. The proposal was simple, honest, without drama. Just 2 people who loved each other deciding to build a future together. I didn't invite Sarah or the stepchildren. That chapter of my life was closed. Andrea and I had a son, Noah, who arrived when I was 47. Being a father at that age, with the maturity and experience I had gained, was completely different from trying to be a father figure to stepchildren who rejected me. With Noah, every moment was cherished, every sacrifice was rewarded with genuine love, and every emotional and financial investment had a real return. My career flourished without the constant weight of supporting an ungrateful family. I became a partner at the engineering firm, doubling my income, but more important than the money was the peace of mind. No more constant demands for cash, no more guilt over setting boundaries, no more walking on eggshells in my own house. From time to time, I'd hear news about Sarah and the stepchildren through mutual acquaintances. Ethan graduated college 4 years later than planned, working full-time while studying part-time. I heard that the effort gave him real perspective. He got a decent job in marketing and was building his independent life. Maddie took a tougher path. She spent years in low-wage jobs, resentful of everyone, blaming the world for her situation. She eventually had a breakthrough when a boss told her exactly what she needed to hear. The world doesn't owe you anything. Stop acting like a victim and become the protagonist of your own life. She returned to school at 23, this time at a community college with scholarships she earned through real effort. Sarah married Martin 2 years after our divorce. The wedding was small, modest. From the photos I accidentally saw on social media, she looked genuinely happy, a deep, calm happiness that was different from the superficial joy she used to project. One day, when Noah was 5, we were at the park. Watching him play, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Ethan, now 28, looking mature in a business suit. "Dan," he said, his voice hesitant. "I hope it's okay for me to approach you. I saw you from across the park and wanted to talk. Just for a moment." "Go ahead," I said cautiously. Ethan looked at Noah playing. "He's beautiful. Your son looks like you." "Thank you. I wanted to tell you something Eve needed to say for years," he continued. "I was an idiot. No, worse than that. I was cruel, ungrateful, and fundamentally unfair to you. You took in a whole blended family. You gave us everything. You asked for only basic respect in return, and I treated you like you were invisible, except when I needed something from you." "Ethan, no, please, let me finish." He interrupted me. "For years, I blamed everyone but myself. But the truth is, I made every decision that led to me humiliating you that Christmas night. I chose to adore a father who was never present while despising the man who paid for every aspect of my life. And I deserved every consequence I received." I was silent, taking in his words. The humility in his voice was genuine, not manipulative. "I accept your apology," I finally said. "It doesn't mean I've forgotten, but I recognize your growth." Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's more than I deserve. Thank you." He walked away without asking for anything else. No money, no request for a relationship, no plea for things to go back to how they were. Just an acknowledgement and an apology. That, finally, was real respect. That night, with Noah asleep in his room and Andrea reading beside me on the couch, I reflected on the journey. I had lost $400,000, 5 years of my life, and a family that was never truly mine. But I had gained something invaluable. My dignity, my self-respect, and the clarity to know exactly what kind of love I deserved. Ethan's words that Christmas night, "We only listen to our biological parents," had been the catalyst for the best decision of my life. Canceling everything wasn't revenge, it was liberation. Some blended families work beautifully. Mine did not, and that was okay, because by walking away from what wasn't working, I made room for what would. And in Andrea's arms, with Noah sleeping safely in his room, finally free from the weight of being just a provider, finally valued as a complete human being, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. Looking back now, I can see that Christmas dinner wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning of everything that truly mattered. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. If it resonated with you, give it a like, comment on what touched you the most, and be sure to mention where you're from. Subscribe to the channel, there are plenty more stories to come.